Well, welcome to the Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You podcast. My name is Sean Langwell, and I am your host. If you like honest and real stories about what it takes to not only become great, but self-confident and bold enough to be yourself, then this show is for you. Each of my guests started out as ordinary people like you and me, but have accomplished extraordinary things in their lives to be considered great masters or experts at what they have been called to do. Join me each episode for inspiring, encouraging, and meaningful conversations with diverse people from all walks of life and industry. Leaders and brave individuals who offer unique insights into the fields of arts, entertainment, business, finance, technology, healthcare, sports, psychology, recovery, self improvement, personal growth, and so much more. Whether you are in the same fields as my guests or not, I guarantee you will walk away from each episode feeling better about yourself and inspired to take the next bold step toward your own goals and aspirations. Your what life will improve if you dare to be great and dare to be you. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thanks for having me on. That introduction's a lot to live up to.
And I realize this, all of my guests, they really do come from all different walks of life, but you've done something. I'm going to read your bio in a second here, but the other reason I want you on the show is you've made the bold leap to jump into consulting, and you're a little over a year into this. So I'm going to read your bio, and then we're going to have a conversation about what that journey's been like from you and go all the way back into your family upbringing and why you chose to make this shift. So for those who don't know, Jonathan Mahrt is the founder of Flywheel Consulting, a boutique business consulting firm focused on digital transformation and business process improvement. Anybody out there use some of that? Growing up working on his family farm, Jonathan learned the value of hard work, creative problem solving, and doing the right things the right way. Doing the right things the right way. It's
That's
worth
right.
repeating. He leverages 14 years of real world business, operations, IT, and automation experience to help his clients make meaningful changes in their businesses by streamlining busy work, modernizing operations, and automating business processes. This allows business owners to spend less time working in their business so that they can spend more time working on their business. I love that last line. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to chat with you today.
It's fun. And, in my 33 plus years of doing advertising sales, predominantly in the media industry, for local newspapers and magazines, and even some national magazines, I talk with a lot of business owners. And that last line that you had on your bio here of, you know, helping business owners to spend less time working in their business. A lot of business owners wear many, many hats, as you and I both know. And that isn't always the smartest thing for business owners to do, especially if they're creative geniuses who took the chance, like you did, to start a consulting firm.
Genius is a big word.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, a creative genius, it maybe genius isn't the right word. It took chutzpah, it took courage, it took a little bit of a leap of faith in trying to figure this out. So let's start with that. What was your motivation for wanting to open up to hang your shingle out there and open up Flywheel Consulting?
Yeah, I so I worked I had a job out of college working for a big company, and then I went back and worked on my family farm for 10 plus years. And working on the farm, you do everything. I tell people it was like getting a MBA from the School of Hard Knocks.
Hmm.
Um, and so you learn all aspects of business. It's very complicated, and there's a lot to manage, uh, and so I learned a lot from that. And I love working on the farm. I also was working with three brothers and my dad. I love working with my family, but working with your family is complicated. Is the short story. And so I decided that for a variety of reasons, it was I wanted to try something different.
Hmm.
There's a lot that goes along with that. It's not easy to like choose to walk away from a family business, but I also felt like this is something. So my family goes back, like as my dad would say, it was been in the feather business, so
In the
related to
feathers of
chickens.
chicken industry.
Chicken, been in the chicken world for like 120 years. and
Oh,
one between both sides of my family. But my dad started his business in the 80s. He built the whole thing. Then I come in, me and my brothers come in, we're helping it. So there was also an element of like, can I build something on my own that isn't just like
mm,
riding on the coattails? Now, riding on the coattails of my dad implies that like I didn't do anything and I was just cruising, which is not the case. But still, it was like also kind of like when I'm on my deathbed, will I regret never having tried, you know? And so that was one of the reasons was like I decided that I needed to do something different. And so the option is either you start your own business or you go and work for someone else.
hmm.
And I've been pretty because working in my family business, I've basically been self-employed for the last 10 plus years. That's like working for someone else is the option of last resort. I've been pretty
Got it.
spoiled, and from that perspective, not having, I mean, everyone, even business owners, is reporting to someone. They're reporting to their employees, they're reporting to the bank, they're reporting to their customers, right? Everyone has accountability. It's just not in the traditional way we think about it.
Right.
But I didn't want to like punch in every day and have to like report to someone about what I was doing. Um, and I also tend to be a person that gets like a little frustrated when I see things are like not done well or I don't think that they make sense. And so I decided to set out on my own. And then the thing is, okay, well, I want to start my own business. Well, what kind of business do I want to start? And uh, the reason I settled on consulting was because, well, one of the biggest reasons is it's very low risk. I'm a pretty risk adverse person,
Hmm.
and there's not a lot of overhead to starting a consulting business. Now, that also means it can be a lot harder to scale, it's a lot harder to build, but I don't have payroll to make, I don't have crazy rent every month, I don't have, I have
Right.
like a few $100 of stuff between like software or insurance, some minor things. Like it's pretty easy to run this business indefinitely. Now, and then the other part of it was one of my favorite things that I did while I was in my family business is that my dad got so busy just running the business that at a certain point, 10 years before I started working there, things kind of stopped changing in terms of how the business was run, right? So from like an IT and business process and operations perspective, nothing had changed in a really long time. So a lot of what I did was said, okay, how do we get more efficient? How do we use less paper? How do we digitize this process? How do we find better ways to leverage technology? And that was the stuff that I found myself getting most excited about, was just finding better ways to do things, especially when it involved technology. And then over the course of time in my conversations with other people who all had businesses or were involved in businesses, I felt like I got excited talking to them about their business and how they were running their business and felt like there were always opportunities for improvement.
So
Um,
let's kind of make the connection here to
sure.
bridge this too, because you spent 10 years plus on working for the family business. Did some of this real world business experience in the operations and IT as well as automation take place while working in the family business? So you got to see and troubleshoot some of the issues that you're now consulting with other clients on, or
Oh,
was there
yeah.
other work? Okay.
Absolutely. I worked for Ernst and Young, which is like a big accounting and consulting firm for a couple years out of college doing IT auditing and consulting. But the bulk of my experience came from working on the family business, right? I've
Mm,
literally worn every hat: sales, marketing, operations, IT, compliance, um, uh, finance, basically anything you can think of, I've been involved in running a business from like a very kind of practical, hands-on perspective. So I have the I'm not a consultant that's never done the work, right? I understand what it's like to be in the trenches running your
And
business.
that's really why I asked the question too, because like with the books that I write, it's all based on personal experience, and that's a lot in the personal growth and development and or coaching and consulting space. That carries a lot of weight. Not a lot of people can claim that. So I want you to kind of elaborate on that a little bit more because you talked about, your father got to a place where the business was not really adapting. It was really, you didn't say it, but the business is probably running him where innovation stopped. You didn't use that word innovation, but the ability to transform and become more efficient. Sometimes you get absorbed with the day to day that you just got to make sure you meet the production, the orders that are coming through and that sort of thing. So what happened in that environment before you made the shift that kind of you carry with you now in working with other clients in terms
Yeah,
of looking at potential challenges and real challenges that you faced in the family business and how you're able to shift that into a communication and conversation to connect with new potential clients.
so a lot of my motivation
Mhm.
was I have more work than I can possibly do, and I always feel like, and I have more things to keep track of than seems feasible because we were in agriculture, right? We're a small business, and so we try and keep things really lean. Like some organizations' response to having too much work is just like, well, I just hire more people, but that's like a really dangerous path because it can lead to bloat, and it's like really hard to find the balance of like no one's working too hard, but everyone's working hard enough. But so a lot of it came down to like there's too many details to manage on the day to day. There's too many things that bottleneck with certain people or including myself. So how do I um, delegate, automate, or eliminate as many of these things as possible?
Go
And
ahead. Can you do me a favor, Jonathan? Sorry to interrupt. Just repeat that because a lot of coaches are talking about what you just said there, and you've got firsthand real world experience that's applicable and practical. So delegate, automate, and eliminate.
or eliminate, yeah. So, I mean, you can either do the thing yourself, or you can delegate it, you can automate it, or you can eliminate it. And so that to me was how I over time began looking at, okay, like what are for me it's always like what are the things I hate doing the most, right?
Right?
That always but that I'm stuck with. And so that's where I start is like what things how do I make it easy if I can, or how do I automate it, or how do I delegate it? And lots of times there were a lot of things because we lacked like really consistent processes or simple processes with a lot of stuff, things required too much judgment.
Mm.
So when you had to make like here's a lot where a lot of this happened was like in our processing plant where we got to pack eggs every day. Well, we have 100 SKUs, and there's like 6 or 7 different types of eggs.
You have a hundred SKUs for eggs?
Yeah, because you think about there's different brands, and then a lot of these brands have like jumbo, extra large, large,
Okay.
medium. Those are all in dozens, and then you may also have 18 packs. You have 5 dozens. You have full case. Like there's just like there's a lot of iterations of products. It's not
Hmm.
necessarily like 100 different types of eggs, but with
Right.
sizes and everything, you get all these SKUs. And so you have eggs coming in, right? You have the orders for the day,
Mm.
uh, and you have all these different SKUs, and so you have to come. Basically, you're having to do all this planning, but sometimes you have to pack. We use reusable materials right out on the ranch, and so they're plastic flats basically. So you have to pack enough eggs that the ranch has materials to put the eggs that the chickens keep laying on, right? You have to also fill orders. You have to fill orders, and so there's this balance where like you don't know. So the example I'm trying to get to is it was really hard for people to know what to pack and how much to pack without doing a lot of math with someone like on a calculator, and someone had
Sure.
to keep it all in their head in terms of what they could run. And there are situations where sometimes you're long on eggs, right? And you can only pack so far ahead because this is a product that expires, right? So you can't really build more
Yeah,
than
it's
maybe a week.
perishable. Yeah.
Yeah, you can only build, maybe a few days of inventory on stuff. And certain queue, yeah, but how much is a few days of inventory on one SKU versus another SKU? Everyone was there. That was someone trying to keep it in all that in their head, right?
Oh, good grief. I empathize. I get it.
And then it was spread across like this information was like you also have to keep track of what's in finished inventory, what's what we called in like nest run inventory, which is like unwashed, ungraded eggs, and balance all that. So this was spread over like 4, 5, 6 different pieces of paper in someone's head, someone doing math, right? So I was like, okay, and also you can't keep track of what's going on unless you're sitting there looking at all the pieces of paper. So
Well, and not only that, I mean, one person's not doing this like I Love Lucy at the chocolate factory on the assembly line on the belt trying to pack the boxes. There's
no,
people, so that becomes what you and I talked about separately was there's some communication efficiencies that can happen here. So
Yeah.
the
So the
process,
to
take on your process, then we'll jump into communication.
yeah, so anyway, to make the long story long, the the conclusion to the eventual conclusion of all this is that I got us onto a digital system where everything is entered into one time and it's automatically updating with what the orders are for the day. It tells you how much what is the maximum amount you can pack that day of that SKU, right? It tells you how many of the nest
Mm.
run eggs you need to run, and then it also tracks in near real time what has been packed so far that day so that you know where you're at in terms of filling orders. And then you can see all that from your phone. So now, and then every person in the organization has access to that information. So now everyone knows exactly what's going on. No one's having to do math anymore. No one's having to remember things anymore because the system is doing all that. It's doing all that for you. So you're externalizing all that information off one person and out of their brain into a system that that is remembering everything for you. And so that's just one, that's a huge cognitive load that is not on the person running the plant anymore, right? It takes all these decisions away that they don't have to make anymore, and everyone has better information. Because we also have issues with like people transposing things wrong, people doing bad
Hmm.
math, people making bad assumptions. Like it's just like an endless amount of mistake of possible areas for mistakes that were just completely eliminated by going to this system.
And going back to what we said at the opening of the show, you kind of discounted it, but this is genius. The genius of simplicity is by definition genius. And it doesn't mean that it has to be something that's Nobel Prize worthy, but creating these efficiencies creates an opportunity to be more efficient with the time and labor inputs. It increases potential profitability because you don't have to hire more people. And it also eliminates a lot of the confusion and he said, she said kind of stuff if communication, verbal communication or written communication isn't passed along from one part of the operation to the next, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was like another simple thing we did is like
Mm.
we'd have these situations where like 4 or 5 people, 6 people need to be informed of what's happening, and then one person would not be told, right? It was like this person was in charge of telling this person, and then this person was in charge of telling that person, and then a person wouldn't get told, and then like a truck would get loaded wrong, or the wrong truck would be loaded. All these kinds of things happen. Really simple thing was we started using group text messages to for updates about, and every possible relevant person was included in that information, and it was just part of the regular, like I made a little shortcut on their phone. They push a button and ask them questions about like because it was like something that a process that happened on a daily basis. It was like how much of this, how much of that, which is going here, which is going there, and they just had to answer the questions, and then it sent a text message out to everyone, and now everyone is informed about what's
So,
going on, and that it's like such a simple thing. It seems so obvious in hindsight, but that helped solve a lot of problems because now everyone knew what was happening, even if they didn't have to act on the information that day
okay.
or in that moment.
They're all in the know, and also it eliminates the drawback of the telephone tag game where you
Also
go
true.
around the circle, and the reverse of somebody in that chain or that chain of communication, whoever it is, then it becomes the blame game, and sometimes it's blame up, blame left, or taking personal responsibility. So you've
Correct.
that what you just created with this t simple text thing. You don't need to go into the exact systems that you created per se, but I do want, if you want to touch on that a little bit and how other manufacturing clients out there who are going to listen to this podcast or see it on YouTube might reach out to you because you've done this firsthand, real world with your family business, and now you're extending some of these efficiencies that you told me before to other clients, and your business is growing. There's going to come a point where you may have to hire other people, but in the infancy, it's still manageable for you right
Yeah.
now, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that is the dream. I mean, I would I mean, it kind of depends on the person and the situation and the circumstance. But if it's just me forever, then I wouldn't it's I struggle to consider that a business because it's only me. If I'm not working, I'm not making money. And so
Right.
that's another bigger can of worms. So the goal is long term would be to hire people. How exactly that looks, I'm not positive yet. Scaling consulting businesses is a little bit of a tricky thing to figure out because it is hard to replicate what you do and what you know. And
Hmm.
so that is a challenge for me to figure out in the future once I get to that point. what I would say is the value I provide is that a lot of organizations are like good at the thing they do, but they don't really have a person that's good at both business and technology. And so at a certain point you might get to, like, depending on who you ask, you might get big enough that you can have like a CIO which is a chief information officer, which is
Hmm.
that kind of person. But you have to be pretty big to have a person dedicated to, like, how do we use technology in our organization?
Hmm.
And so that's a lot of what I do is I come into a situation and I understand your business well. So I'm not just like a nerd behind a keyboard, right? That has no grasp of like the real world running of the business. But I also am not like afraid of the computer, right? I know kind of what's available, what technology solutions are may be available. I know the questions to ask. I know where I can identify the opportunities. So the value I provide is like sitting it for especially small, medium-sized businesses. I sit in that intersection and can help identify the opportunities, ask good questions that are going to help bring out the best in their businesses.
So let's talk briefly about it. I had it as one of the questions here. We probably won't get to all these, but this is relevant to you and to any other coaches that are or consultants that are going to listen to this podcast, not without you sharing personal insights. But one challenge for what I call solopreneurs or really self-employed business owners, which you and I are, and I'm also
Hmm.
an employee, is drumming up new business development. So talk briefly, if you don't mind, just about what your process is with that and frame it in the faction like for my what you and I talked about before. I think we did this on your podcast is I'm at a place now where I can choose for the new business development that I want to approach, choose the type of clients that I feel really good about working with. And that may sound egotistical, but it's not. It's about the strengths and the interests and the values that I bring to the table and trying to find a client that has that similar rapport. So how do you go about this?
I would say that I really just focus on transparency. Um, I'm pretty upfront. First off, like I never want to promise, the moon and I don't know, deliver a rock, right? Whatever. There's some
Mm-hmm.
saying in there, but I always want to make sure that I can actually deliver value to a customer. So I'm pretty transparent about what I think I can do and what I think I can't do, or a potential client. Uh, I am not yet at that point where I'm turning down a lot of opportunities. I would say there are opportunities I don't pursue as heavily because they are not in my wheelhouse. Um, I think clients that are really like don't understand the value that I provide, even though I try and educate them on it, and are just gonna like nickel and dime me, that's not a great use of my time because then I'm
Right.
just fighting them constantly. People that say they want to change but then don't really want to change, like I can't provide a
Mm.
lot of value to someone that because that is hard. That's a lot of what I deal with is organizational change. And so if there isn't if the tone at the top isn't that we need to change and there's even though part of my job is being that guide and help driving that change, if there isn't any motivation to actually do it from the top, then it won't be successful.
That
Um,
makes sense though, right? I mean, you got to have some buy-in, at least from the key leadership or the board or the key decision makers that this is a direction that they want to go as a company before you can offer a solution, right?
exactly. Exactly.
So
So,
this begs the other question. I don't know if I want to put the cart before the horse. So you've worked with the client. Let them remain anonymous right now, but walking in to establish what their goals are and that there is the willingness on their part to, they've identified and you guys agree to some kind of a plan of action. What kind of measures do you put in place and how do you feel about the clients? I know it's only been a year, but the clients that you've worked with in terms of what those measures are. And the reason I'm asking this question, Jonathan, is
mhm.
a lot of business owners, because they're wearing so many hats, they don't know the true metrics to measure of what the value of a change or an investment is directly. They know at the bottom line what their cash flow is, but
Right.
these other incremental changes that you're introducing, there's benchmarks and there's steps along the way. So what are some that you might be willing to share just for the listening audience?
Sure. So I think what I tell a lot of people is that if I'm doing my job right, then I'm free because I should be saving you more money in your business than it's costing you to work with me. And that's been true of every client that I've had so far. That, however, takes different forms depending on the situation. So,
Yeah,
like one client, he uh coming back to that customer, actually this is my very first customer, coming back to the cash flow thing. He knew that overall the business was making money, but he was making these custom molds for glass blowing, and they're like very labor intensive. They're all made by hand. They're very expensive. Like some of them are the bigger ones were like $500 pop. Okay, they're like made out of brass. The issue was is that some of the molds he was making, uh, but I guess he had no idea how much money he would if he was profitable on each of the different SKUs
got
based
it.
on the pricing. It was more like, stick a finger in the air and see which way the wind blows and kind of guesstimate. So what I said was, because originally we sat down to talk about like how could we better leverage technology, and it turned out actually the biggest value I could provide was understanding his costing out his entire process so that he knew exactly how much materials, labor, time, everything went into each one of his SKUs so that he could do a better job pricing them. And after we did that, it turns out that some SKUs he was losing money on, some he was breaking even on, and some he was making a lot of money on. And so then we came up with a strategy that allowed him to, on average, across all of his SKUs, raise his prices about 20%. So that now he was making money on everything.
And that's smart. And some of these businesses, I mean, every business has some loss leader pricing that is there. I mean, Costco's a classic example. I just ran up there quickly on a break to go get, my weekly shop. But the hot dogs, Costco sells more hot dogs than all the ballparks in the world, in the United States combined.
Yes.
Buck and a half for a hot dog and a soda. How can you not? But people come in there.
That is a great point. That was not the issue here. He had a very capped. There's only like a couple people that like in the whole country that make these molds. Like he has a very captive audience. They're highly sought after. He just did not have a good strategy for how to raise prices because he didn't know what his costs were. And so that's of course not exactly on the operational side of things, but that's some of the more general business stuff that I help with. Is like lots of people don't even know how to begin to like actually understand their costs on a particular part of their business.
And that provides tangible value too, because then they can run inventory at the end of the month and see what, they have a line item profit margin statement for every single SKU if they want to go that far, and they
Hmm.
probably do. But it also demonstrates that the simple shifts that you've made have quantifiable, measurable metrics that are, demonstrate the value of what you've done by sitting there and helping them, right?
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of the other stuff I do is a lot of time and labor savings. Um, in addition to sometimes being able to do like really basic things like doing an analysis on how much they're spending on their current technology spend, how much they're spending on credit cards, like payment processing is another one
Mm.
that I help people evaluate. So one person like I helped him get onto a tire shop, get onto some shop management software because they were completely paper how they were doing everything. And as a part of that was doing a payment processing analysis, and it was a savings of like $2,000 or $3,000 a month just going to a different credit card processor.
And these are things that this is part of why I wanted to have you on the show too, is out of sight, out of mind. But these are the things why people invest in people like you and I to help them improve their business, because a small investment can have long-term major impacts on the bottom line.
Hmm.
I mean, 2 to 3 grand a month may not sound like a whole lot. It's 36 grand a year, but if they're going to be in business 20 years, it's $720,000. It could be a
Yeah,
$1 million decision 10, 15 years down the road. So,
right.
uh,
Not to mention the time value of money, right?
exactly,
S-
exactly.
Yeah.
So let's just kind of put a little I don't want to do a role play here, but just kind of put this into a situation of you're sitting down with an entrepreneur who there's just tons and tons of excitement around a certain thing. Um, how do you approach it when they still are kind of firm about wanting to do all these things? Because all of us have certain things that we think we're good at, i.e., some of my clients still think they're really good at marketing when they're really not, and they need to delegate that or give it to somebody else or not do it at all. How do you approach this? And this is kind of a little, I'm pulling the carpet out from under you, but I'm going to put you on the spot a little. How do you
It's fine.
handle that? You know?
I think one of if since we are since you're good at using superlatives, I'm going to use a superlative. I think one of my superpowers is asking people really good questions,
Hmm.
and to get at the heart of the issue and what they do and why they do it. So an example of someone in this situation, I was talking to a solopreneur. He owns like a video like production and marketing company, and he wants to grow it. He was like relatively successful as a solo guy, would use contractors and stuff, but he was like constantly overwhelmed, felt like his business was hitting a wall, and like trying to like figure out, okay, maybe I need some software to get more organized and all this kind of stuff. And so we just sat down and talked about his business, like how he's making money, how much money he makes on different kinds of work, who his clients are, what he's good at, what he likes to do. And what it really came down to was like, okay, what makes him unique? Well, it's him going out and shooting, right? That's how he really makes the money. What is a huge time sink that happens every time he shoots? It was editing the video,
Mm,
right? What's the easiest thing to train someone and offload and free him up to go sell and shoot more? Finding a video editor. And he uh and he was like had all these ideas about all these different ways he was trying to tackle his problem. I was like, man, you need a video editor. And then he try and make an excuse or says this thing. I was like, no, you need to hire a video editor. And I know it's a pain in the butt. I know it's hard to train someone, but that's immediately going to free up like 8 hours a week of your time, just or more, by hiring a good video editor and getting a good process in place with them. And he finally sat down and did it. And he came back afterwards and he's like, it totally transformed my business. He's
that's
like, I've been
awesome.
able to 10x things because I have that in place now, and I don't have to waste so much time editing video.
So, and that's, you said, I'm just going to kind of put a bow on what you just said there because we're going to end on this and give people an opportunity so they can find out how to get a hold of you depending on whatever business they have. Um, you asked some questions, you listened, you got to know what the real business process was and what his passion was
Hmm.
and what the bottleneck is. So that's salesmanship 101, but it's about finding out and being comfortable enough to ask those right questions. But the bow on the end of that is once he trusted you enough to make that move and go do the bold action on his part, which is let go of this part that he may still wanted to figure it out because a lot of entrepreneurs like to have control over the whole picture and vision,
Especially creative people.
especially creative people, right?
Hmm.
I had the hardest time hiring an editor, and finally I was just like, I need to hire an editor. I'm not going to be a better writer until I do hire an editor for my books, and it costs a lot of money.
Hmm.
I learned a ton from it. But the result there is it 10x the return on his thing, and it gave him back 8 hours a week of his time.
Yeah.
That's whatever his time's worth. That's huge,
Oh,
Jonathan.
yeah, he's probably he's charging like 250 dollars an hour, something
I
crazy,
mean,
or maybe more than that. I
1,600
can't
bucks a
remember.
month. That's a $6,000 a month move, less whatever he's paying for the editor to do it
Right.
and such. So this is huge. So here's your chance right now. We're coming up on the end of the time, but here's a chance for you to kind of put your shingle out there on who your ideal client is and knowing and have some caveats there as who you prefer to work with or what your ideal client is or what your services are and how people can get a hold of you.
Sure. So the generic thing is I can help anyone that has a business. But I think where I am the most valuable is legacy family businesses.
Mm,
So these are people where the next generation's in there. So that's, someone maybe my age or younger. The previous generation's still there. And there tends to be this tension between one generation wants to change things, the other one doesn't really want to, but they also need to change things. And so I understand how to navigate those family dynamics while helping um, push the change and do things in a way that everyone's happy with. I just understand all the hard things about running a family business and the decisions you need to make and how to figure that stuff out. So that I think is particularly one that like hasn't changed anything for a really long time. Like my
Hmm.
family's business, we are still doing the same things we were as we were 20 or 30 years ago. Like none of that has changed
Yeah.
because, dad settled on the perfect solution, settled on something that worked, and now we're there, and that's it, and
Yep.
Joe wants to change it, but dad doesn't want to change anything. And so that's where I think I provide the most value and have the most success. um in terms of
You
people be
also,
oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, you also mentioned when we first met that one of the things that you really specialize in, and you alluded to it earlier, is helping people digitize, get off of the punch key paper trail, because digitization, it's daunting if you're not familiar, you have a phobia um, to digital order processing, et cetera, which you've already elaborated, you know,
Yeah.
extensively here, the benefit of that. So you want to talk briefly about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what that often looks like is better leveraging technology in their business. And a lot of these legacy family businesses are still heavily paper based.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of opportunity there. The flip side of it is they may not be like exclusively paper, but maybe they're like using a little bit of a system here, a little bit of a system there. They're using like 15,000 spreadsheets. It's very like disjointed, messy, having to copy information across multiple things. So there's often a lot of, even if they are using some things, lots of times they're not integrated and talking to each other, right? The idea is that you should only have to enter information one time for it to be useful everywhere. So there's kind of like those are the two sides of the spectrum. That is what digital transformation is going from being more paper based or very limited technology based to fully embracing technology on a larger scale. And then the business process improvement is what walks alongside that is like, how can we get more efficient by using technology? How in the day-to-day running of our business, where are the opportunities to make things easier, to streamline them, and then save money?
I love it. And your creds are on here for those who watch this on video when I post it on YouTube, but for the listening audience, go ahead and give them your contact and how to get a hold of you.
Yeah, the you can go to my website, flywheelconsulting.co, not .com, .co. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook under Flywheel Consulting, or on LinkedIn, Jonathan Mahrt on LinkedIn.
Do you want to give them your email and phone number on here too,
Well,
or
it's on here too, yeah. So you can email me, Jonathan, Jonathan, at flywheelconsulting.co, or feel free to give me a ring or a text at 707-232-5352.
Jonathan, you're a great guest, and I'm glad that we had this conversation. And seriously, thanks for being on the show today. I can't believe 45 minutes went by that fast, but
It it flew by. Thank you so much for having me on. It
oh,
was it was a pleasure.
oh my goodness. Folks, this has been Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You. I'm your host, Sean Langwell. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review. You can find the entire library and future episodes on Podbean and wherever most podcasts can be heard. Search my name, Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, be the best you can be.